Hi, and welcome to the Airbrush Garage. I'm Dan, and thanks for checking out my channel. I'm going to be passing on all the tips, tricks, and accessory builds that I made for my airbrush area in my garage throughout my past 20 years. I know how I struggled when I was a beginner, so hopefully some of my videos may make your life a little bit easier and help you move forward in your airbrushing endeavors. So if you like this content, hit that subscribe button down below, hit the bell so you don't miss out on future content. So with that, let's get started. Today on the Airbrush Garage, we're going to be talking about compressors. A couple different kinds, what they cost, how to set them up. So with that, let's go. So for people who are just getting into airbrushing and you don't want to spend a lot of money until you find out if this is something that's really for you, what I suggest is you go out and you get yourself a cheap airbrush compressor. Even a cheap compressor set up correctly will do the job. My first compressor lasted me 10 years. I got from Harbor Freight, Central Pneumatic, paid $65 for it. I did have to buy the water trap, okay, and the pressure gauge, only a couple dollars, and it lasted me 10 years. So this compressor here, what happens is when you have it set up and you press the trigger for your airbrush and you want air, this compressor turns on. The good point to it is it's not very loud. So when I first started out, I had a stand-up tank compressor. It's in my garage. I'm out 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, and depending on how close your neighbors are, those compressors are very loud. Pancake compressor, your general automotive type or nail gun compressors, they're very loud. So that doesn't work real well at 10 o'clock at night when your neighbor's baby is trying to sleep. These compressors here that I'm going to be showing you today, the airbrush compressors, are going to be very quiet. You can run these at 10 o'clock at night with your garage door open with no problem. So with this type of compressor right here, it doesn't have a tank. It's tankless. It has a little piston in here that just, when you hit your trigger on your airbrush, the piston will go up and down and pump air directly to your airbrush. So when you stop, this stops. When you spray, this goes on. Now, that works well. I tend to find that they get a little hot, but it seemed to hold up. Again, 10 years later, it still works for 65 bucks. So I don't recommend that you go out and spend a whole lot of money unless you blow this into something that's, a full-time professional job. For you just hobbyists out there and people just learning, don't go out and spend a lot of money. Now, after a while, when you find out that this is for you and you want to upgrade a little bit, I got this one here. This has a small tank on it. This is by Master Airbrush, and I paid about $170 for it. So maybe double the cost, a little bit more than double the cost of the Harbor Freight one. But Master Airbrush has a lot of products that are good products and they're reasonably priced. Again, maybe not the compressor that you need to go full-time and be professional airbrush all day. I will say that I think it would work, but if you want to spend a little bit more money and get something with a bigger tank, that's fine. Now, you probably wonder, well, why do you need a tank? So what happens is this one right here is a dual piston compressor, okay? So what happens is this pumps air down into the tank. The tank is a holding tank. Now, this tank right here, or this air compressor, the other thing you want to look at is how many CMFs will it produce. This one here will produce 1.6 CMFs. That's cubic feet per minute of air volume. So whenever it comes to any spray gun, whether it's an airbrush or an automotive gun, everything is rated on CMFs, the cubic feet per minute. So at 1.6 CMFs, that does just fine for an airbrush. But getting back to the tank, the reason for the tank is it fills the tank with air and then it pushes the air to the airbrush without the motor running constantly. Okay, so the bigger the tank, they always say, the better, but I find that this works, again, just fine. So this instead of coming on, you won't hear this motor running every time you press the trigger on your airbrush. It'll run when it gets down to a certain volume of air. It will kick back on, refill your tank. Now, this setup that I have here, I happen to be running 3 airbrushes. So no matter what compressor you get, you're going to want a water trap. Okay, so you want a water trap because especially in these high, like I said, out in the garage, you got all of these high humidity, especially in the summertime, depending where you live, high humidity, high heat conditions, a lot of condensation will build up, you know, within the tank and the lines. Now, speaking of that, and I said about this, the difference, one of the major differences I find with the tank and the tankless is that, remember I said that this one gets hot. Well, what happens is when this gets hot, it tends to push a lot of hot air through your line. You really don't want that. First of all, the hot air will contribute to tip dry. And by the way, I have a video on that. Go check that out about tip dry. But that will contribute to tip dry. Not only that, you will get a lot of condensation or buildup into your water trap. With this one here, I find even on the most humid days, I don't get very much water in my trap, because what happens is the air's going down into here and it's allowed to cool before it comes out here. Now, to combat the moisture, no matter what compressor you're using, I put an inline water trap on every one of my guns. Okay, so now the biggest difference that I find with these compressors is, again, when I was using this compressor, I would not only get water in this trap, I would get water in this trap. And the reason being is because, again, this heats up, it's pushing hot air through, and the hot air is coming through the line. It's literally bypassing this trap here, and it's getting caught in this trap. So there was days where I was constantly, this thing would get, you know, I'd be spraying, I get water, I'm like, whoa, what the heck? And I'd look in, that would be full, and I'd have to relieve the water. With this compressor, I've never had that happen. So that is the biggest difference. So my recommendation is, yeah, this is good to start off with, but spend $170. It's under $200. Get a compressor like this, and you won't have any water problems, at least very minimal. Now, with that said, the other part of setting this compressor up and making sure that everything is working properly is making sure everything is airtight. So when you're putting on your trap and your gauge, you want, what I do is I use just a little bit of plumber's tape, or, you know, they sell it in like a liquid form. But you want to make sure that all of your threads, that anything you're threading in has a little bit of this plumber's tape. And you want to wrap that around your threads to make sure everything's all sealed up. So before you screw anything in, make sure you're using your plumber's tape around your threads. That will create a really good seal. So once I screw this in and I make sure everything, and I'll give you a little tip on how to make sure everything is sealed up. You screw everything in tight. I have a 3 airbrush setup coming off of this compressor. I don't ever use 2 airbrushes at one time. This compressor says it's good for 2 airbrushes. I've never tried it. I'm sure it can handle it, but I'm a solo act, so I only ever use 1 airbrush at a time. But what I would say is that I like to buy components that match the component that I'm trying to match it to. So this is a master airbrush. There's several splitters out there, and I happen to buy the master airbrush splitter because I just feel that product to product, it works better. That's just another little tip. Now, with that said, what I like to do is I like to take a little bit of soapy water and a paintbrush and just put it on all of the threaded joints that you got, especially if you're using a splitter. If you're going to lose air anywhere, it may be from your hose. So again, I like to use master airbrush hoses. I think they're really good. I don't find any air leaks with them, but you can with a cheaper hose, especially a lot of ones that come, like the coiled hoses, they're really thin, that come with airbrushes sometimes. I don't like to use them because you can get some leakage going in here. So I don't only check the threaded joints of anything I got connected, I also check my airbrush connection joint, because if anywhere that's going to leak, it would be a good spot or a possible spot. So here's the problem. Once you have an air leak, okay, that 1.6 CMFs are really not going to your gun. You're reducing the cubic feet per minute going to your gun with any leak. So you really want to make sure that all of your leaks are tightened up so that you have none, so you're getting the full benefit of what this compressor is supposed to do. Okay, if you do that, I think you're going to find that you'll be very happy with your compressor. So even if you have a cheap compressor, as long as it's set up correctly, if you set this one up the same way, you can see inside here that I had, you can see all the white tape that I had on those joints. Okay, so as long as you set it up correctly, you will have much success with a cheap compressor too. It's just that keep in mind, one without a tank will heat the air much more coming through your gun, and you'll experience a lot more moisture in your traps. So I hope this has been helpful to you. Good luck with your setup, and from my garage to yours, we'll see you next time. Hi guys, thanks for coming by the Airbrush Garage. If you like this video, check out some of my other videos for all your airbrush tune-ups. And if you like content like this, hit the subscribe button down below. Hit the bell so you get future notifications. Share it out with your family and your friends. Really appreciate that. And we'll see you in the next video, and keep on painting.